Hello, welcome to the Essential Vibration Channel, a space to awaken, feel and expand your consciousness. There are days when life seems to follow a script that has already been written, as if each step were just a repetition. The sun rises, the hours pass, the voices around us blend into predictable noises. But inside us, there is a silent, almost imperceptible call that insists on being heard, a subtle movement that cannot be explained but that pulses like an echo. Perhaps you have already felt this restlessness, that feeling that something is trying to communicate, but you don't know if it's intuition, coincidence, or just your mind creating meaning. Gregg Braden invites us to look at this mystery in a different way. He reminds us that the universe is like a great living web, a unified field that responds to our emotions, our choices, as if it were a sensitive organism that perceives every vibration. Dispenza, in turn, reveals that the brain is a limited filter, which always interprets the world through the lens of past experiences. Many messages are lost because we vibrate at the frequency of doubt, not recognition. The truth is that just as a radio needs to be tuned to the exact frequency to pick up music, we too need to learn to tune our minds and hearts. Only then can we realize that the universe's answers are not hidden. They are already happening, here and now. And in the face of this mystery, a question arises that echoes like an invitation. What if what you call coincidence is actually a dialogue? A dialogue that has always existed, but that you have not yet learned to hear. There are moments when images, words, or situations seem to insistently return to our path. A number that appears repeatedly, an animal that catches your eye in different places, a phrase that appears in unexpected contexts. These repetitions are not mere coincidences, but signs that demand attention. The danger lies in treating them as unimportant curiosities, because when ignored, these signs lose their power of revelation and dissolve into the flow of daily distraction. Gregg Braden reminds us that recurring patterns function as subtle markers. They are indications that we are touching the frequency of imminent change, as if the field around us were signaling that a new cycle wishes to be born. However, there is also a silent risk, interpreting each repetition as an absolute prophecy. When this happens, clarity is lost and the mind creates narratives that do not correspond to the truth of the heart. The key lies in discernment. It is necessary to observe not only the symbol, but also the emotional state it awakens, the context in which it arises, the energy it brings with it, the impact it leaves within us. Differentiating the echo of one's own mind from a true sign is a process of refinement that requires presence and sensitivity. Just as a musician trains their ear to distinguish each note, we too need to train our perception. Only then can we recognize when repetition is a real call from the universe and not just a reflection of our internal expectations. There are experiences that arrive so precisely that they seem to transcend common logic. You encounter someone at the exact moment you were thinking about them, receive an unexpected answer the instant you silently ask a question, or an external event completely reorganizes your perception of that moment. These experiences are not mere coincidences because they not only happen outside of you, but they transform what happens inside you. The difference between coincidence and synchronicity lies in the intensity of the impact. Coincidence may be curious, but it passes quickly, leaving almost no trace. Synchronicity, on the other hand, opens a crack in time, a kind of micro-portal in which your mind and the surrounding field momentarily align, as Gregg Braden describes. In this brief encounter between intention and manifestation, consciousness expands and you realize that you are not separate from the intelligence that moves life. However, caution is necessary. When you seek synchronicity as proof or confirmation of something you desperately want, it becomes distorted. True synchronicity does not need to be forced. It comes naturally, like a breeze through an open window, not as something we try to capture at any cost. What makes it so powerful is precisely its ability to alter your internal state. The universe does not send signals to satisfy superficial curiosities, but to provoke profound shifts in perception. Recognizing synchronicity is less about collecting extraordinary events and more about honoring the silent transformation it generates in the heart and mind. There are moments when the universe seems to choose silence as its language. There are no repeating numbers flashing, no unlikely encounters, no obvious symbols. Instead, an unexpected, almost uncomfortable stillness arises, as if all the turmoil of the mind were suddenly suspended. It is a silence that is not empty, but full, charged with an invisible presence. This silence can be recognized by the contrast it creates. Suddenly, the anxiety that had been there for hours dissolves for no apparent reason. The whirlwind of thoughts calms down, as if someone had closed a noisy door inside you. This is the space where subtle answers arrive, not in the form of words, but as a feeling of clarity that cannot be explained, only felt. Gregg Braden describes how states of cardiac coherence facilitate these invisible downloads. When the heart and mind are in tune, the field opens up and communication happens without noise. It is not information that comes from outside, but a memory of something that has always been inside you, waiting to be heard. The practice of conscious silence is not a complicated ritual. All it takes is a few minutes of rhythmic breathing, where the mind learns to give space to the heart. In these intervals, the universe speaks in its purest language, that of harmony. Silence then ceases to be an absence and becomes a portal. An invitation to realize that sometimes the answer is not in what echoes, but in what rests. There is a silent expectation that often sabotages our perception, the need for the sign to appear exactly as we imagine it. When this happens, we close the door to other forms of manifestation. We become stuck in a mental mold, believing that the answer will come through a specific dream, a clear vision, or a sequence of numbers, and we fail to realize that the universe is already responding to us in unexpected ways. Gregg Braden reminds us that the intelligence of the field does not operate according to our linear logic, but according to the vibrational frequency we maintain. In other words, what we receive is not shaped by the format we desire, but by the energetic quality we emit. When we become attached to how the answer should come, we fail to see the unexpected that is already before us. A simple example helps to illustrate this. Someone asks for an answer in their dreams, insisting that they will only believe it if the information comes there. But the next day, the answer appears in the spontaneous gesture of a stranger, in a casual phrase that touches them deeply. The person, however, may ignore this gift because they were stuck in the expectation of a dream sign. The key is to let go of form and keep an open heart. It is not about asking the universe to bend to our will, but to align our inner state to recognize what has already been sent. When we detach ourselves from form, we make room for surprise. And in that space, life reveals its wisdom in simple but transformative details. Haste is an invisible noise that disrupts our connection with the field. When we are in a hurry, our bodies may be still, but our minds are racing. And in this incessant movement, there is no room to perceive subtle signals. Haste generates anxiety, and anxiety distorts the frequency we emit. It is like trying to listen to soft music amid the noise of an engine. Gregg Braden describes that communication with the field does not happen at accelerated speeds, but at the rhythm of the heart, which is slow, cadenced, deep. When the heart aligns, time seems to expand, and it is in this expanded space that the answer finds its way. The agitated mind, on the contrary, narrows the channel, closing perception. We often believe that rushing the process will speed up the result, but the opposite happens. Impatience creates blockages, and haste blinds us to what is already happening. Thus, we keep asking for signs, when in fact they are already before us, only masked by the speed of our mind. True transformation occurs when we let go of urgency and enter a state of presence. It is not passivity, but trust. It is a kind of inner silence that allows the field to manifest itself without being overwhelmed by our expectations. It is in this space that life whispers, and only a slowed-down heart can hear it. Waiting is fertile ground, but also dangerous. When we wait, we reveal part of our confidence, but at the same time, we open space for hidden emotions to manifest. Often, it is not the waiting itself that hurts us, but the silent feelings that inhabit it. Anxiety, frustration, fear of not being heard. Each of these emotions creates interference in the field, like dense clouds blocking the light. Gregg Braden points out that the field responds not to the request we make in words, but to the frequency we hold in our hearts. If the heart asks for confidence but carries insecurity, it is insecurity that echoes. If we ask for abundance but hold on to fear of loss, it is fear that is projected. Waiting then becomes a mirror of the emotions we avoid looking at. The silence of waiting can be unbearable for those who try to control it. But for those who understand, it is revelation. It is in this interval between the request and the response that we truly see what we carry within. If we learn to listen to these noises, waiting ceases to be torture and becomes an opportunity for alignment. When we accept waiting as part of the process, something changes. The heart relaxes, the mind quiets, and the field finds clarity to respond. What seemed like a delay reveals itself to be refinement. Waiting is not the absence of a response. It is often the space where the response is constructed. When the answer does not come in the time we desire, the mind begins to fabricate explanations. We create stories to fill the void, narratives to calm our anxiety, justifications that distance us from the truth. It is as if we want to take the place of life itself, imposing meaning where there is still only silence. This self-deception is subtle. Sometimes we convince ourselves that something went wrong. Other times we believe that we are not worthy of what we ask for. At times we create grandiose illusions to hide our fear of frustration. But all these invented answers come at a cost. They distance us from inner clarity. Braden explains that the field responds to coherence, not illusion. When we lie to ourselves, we do not deceive the universe. The energy we sustain is not that of faith, but of masked doubt. And this incoherence is reflected in what we attract. The real challenge is to remain emotionally honest, to recognize when we do not know, when it has not yet arrived, when life is in gestation. Silence can be uncomfortable, but it is in silence that truth finds space to be born. Made-up answers are shortcuts that lead us astray. Conscious waiting, on the other hand, is a straight road. The more aligned we are with the reality of the present moment, the closer the manifestation will be. Disbelief sets in quietly, almost imperceptibly. It emerges like a shadow that quietly erodes confidence, making the heart heavy and the mind skeptical. Every unspoken doubt, every unanswered internal question, acts as an invisible block that prevents energy from flowing freely. Dispenza reminds us that the brain filters signals through past experiences. When disbelief dominates, we interpret every synchronicity or subtle message as mere coincidence, and the unified field finds it difficult to respond to our vibration. What we ask for remains, but our frequency is misaligned. Braden emphasizes that emotional coherence is essential for subtle responses to manifest. Disbelief, even if subtle, distorts this coherence, diminishing sensitivity to the messages the universe sends us. It is like trying to hear a soft melody amid constant and confusing noise. Recognizing the presence of disbelief is the first step toward releasing it. Accepting that doubt exists, without judgment, allows the frequency of the heart to be reestablished. Mindfulness transforms invisible weight into awareness, and awareness makes room for the universe to respond with clarity. Disbelief is a silent force, but it is not invincible. When observed with honesty and compassion, it becomes a guide, pointing out where alignment still needs to be restored. It is in this delicate balance between faith and patience that manifestation finds fertile ground. There are subtle moments when everything aligns and life seems to whisper in sync. These moments do not announce themselves with thunderous signs. They arrive like silent breaths, like a perfect pause between the past and the future, where perception becomes crystal clear. Braden explains that the unified field operates with an intelligence that perceives time differently than ours. It responds to the internal state, not to external urgency. Thus, the right moment is not imposed, but felt, like a perfect note that resonates in the heart even before it is perceived by the mind. Dispenza reinforces that the brain tends to run ahead, projecting expectations and trying to decipher patterns ahead of time. This anticipation creates anxiety and blurs perception, causing the ideal moment to go unnoticed. When the mind quiets down and the body opens up, the clarity arises that the right moment is already present and action flows naturally. Recognizing the right moment is an exercise in sensitivity, a dance between attention and patience. Every synchronicity, every gesture, every silence carries information that can only be deciphered when the consciousness remains awake and receptive. Time ceases to be an enemy and becomes an ally. Life reveals its magic not in haste, but in conscious waiting. The art of perceiving the right moment is, in fact, the art of aligning oneself with the frequency of one's own existence, where each choice resonates with what one truly desires to manifest. Alignment is not a single act, but a continuous practice that is woven into every moment of life. It is feeling your own body, perceiving your emotions, and allowing your mind to become a silent ally, ready to receive signals and messages that previously went unnoticed. Gregg Braden describes how the unified field responds to internal coherence, to the emotional state we constantly cultivate. Every deep breath, every conscious pause, every moment of mindfulness acts as a bridge between the inner world and the subtle responses of the universe. Dispenza adds that the daily repetition of small practices creates new neural connections, strengthening sensitivity to signals and synchronicities. The brain learns to perceive patterns that previously seemed random, and life becomes clearer, richer in meaning and purpose. This daily practice transforms perception. Small gestures, such as listening to the silence of one's own heart or observing the repetitions of signs, become powerful indicators of the flow of life. Alignment ceases to be a theory and becomes a lived, tangible experience, felt in every choice and every moment. True mastery lies in living in constant harmony, gently adjusting to the frequency of what really matters. When the practice becomes part of everyday life, life ceases to be a series of coincidences and reveals itself as a continuous and profound dialogue with the universe. Understanding the universe is like learning a new language. It is not immediate or easy, but it is deeply transformative. Every sign perceived, every synchronicity recognized, strengthens the connection between mind, body, and unified field, creating a subtle harmony that guides choices and experiences. Gregg Braden explains that communication with the field is not magic, but a skill cultivated through conscious observation and constant adjustment of one's internal state. Every gesture, every aligned thought, every clearly felt emotion serves as a bridge to perceiving previously unnoticed messages. Dispenza adds that by honoring and recognizing signs, the brain creates new neural connections, increasing sensitivity and perception of the subtle responses of the universe. Constant practice transforms small intuitions into deep understandings, making life clearer, more meaningful, and richer. True mastery is not in collecting signs or waiting for external evidence, but in adjusting one's own internal frequency to live in constant dialogue with life. Each moment becomes an opportunity to listen more, understand better, and align with the flow of existence. Like learning a language, understanding the universe requires daily practice, attention to detail, and a willingness to listen with an open heart, rather than speaking hastily or demandingly. This attunement reveals that life is, above all, a deep, continuous, and meaningful dialogue. If this message touched you, give it a like, comment, and follow the Essential Vibe. Your presence is part of this journey,